Hello and welcome to another edition of Stratasys Sessions. Today we bring you a webinar from our medical 3D printing team here at Stratasys. We have partnered recently with a company called Axial3D, and today we're going to be discussing patient-specific medical device development. I don't want to wait any longer to get started with this great chat, so I'm going to hand it over to Evan Hochstein from the Stratasys medical 3D printing team. Take it away, Evan.
Thanks, Justin, for those kind words. Dan, it's great to see you again.
Evan, really good to see you, and thanks so much for inviting us to talk today with you guys about patient-specific medical developments.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. All right, and to introduce myself, my name is Evan Hochstein. I've been with Stratasys for about 8 years, and I can't talk about just joining Stratasys without bringing up why I joined Stratasys. I was fortunate to volunteer with both Scott and Lisa Crump back in my college years as a volunteer and mentor to many STEM education students in industry. And through meeting them, they taught me a little bit about 3D printing, or maybe a lot of it, Scott being the co-founder of Stratasys with Lisa, they knew a lot, and they really turned me on to 3D printing for the first time in my life, and taught me how I could mentor students with 3D printing. So that's why I joined Stratasys in the first case. I have a really good tie-in with education and working with a lot of different education groups, which at the end of the day brought me into medical, actually. That's how I first decided, hey, I want to be in medical, because in education, I was making an impact on students. In medical, I'm making an impact on a lot of patients. So over the past 8 years, I've fulfilled a variety of roles within Stratasys. I started off actually helping define different processes within our manufacturing lab. How do we really create a manufacturing process around medical with additive technology, finally moving into an application engineering role for multiple years, working directly with our additive systems and enabling our customers to be successful. Before I moved into my new role, working with Axial3D and really our software solutions about how do we make things more scalable and bring more additive technologies and processes to the market for patient-specific solutions.
So Evan, yeah, thanks very much for that. So for everybody in the webinar, you don't know me, my name is Daniel Crawford, and I'm the founder and the Chief Strategy Officer here at Axial3D. So I have a background in biomedical engineering and medical visualization, so turning lots of 2D images into less complicated 3D models for different areas of medicine.
How did you get started in that, Dan? What inspired you to go into this?
Yeah, so good question. So really, look, the big inspiration for Axial3D as a company stemmed off the back of my master's degree, and it was really looking into how you can take complex two-dimensional images in medicine, so mainly DICOM images that are derived from CTs or MRIs or PET or SPECT scans. And really the kind of core ethos of the degree that I was doing then is like the human body is made up of thousands of amorphous three-dimensional structures. So it's a little bit counterintuitive that in medicine, and particularly in surgery, surgeons and radiologists and clinicians are really diagnosing and planning and treating their patients based on these two-dimensional images. So really the kind of light bulb moment for the company starting itself was about 10 years ago now, which is scary. It's really a woman who'd fallen off her motorbike in Glasgow and fractured her pelvis. I was able to take her two-dimensional images, form that into a 3D file, and then 3D print it, and give that to a surgeon within a couple of days, which completely transformed that care for that patient. So that was really the light bulb moment for the company starting at the time. And I know that we're very focused on medical applications, and I suppose, Evan, it's no secret that over the past 6 months, Stratasys put a pretty significant investment in the Axial3D, who are really focused on medicine. I suppose myself, from an engineering background, like I've followed Stratasys for 10, 15 years. You guys have been around for way longer than that in the mechanical engineering space, the aeronautical. Like where do you see the value, or from a Stratasys point of view, where you guys see the value in these 3D printing applications, specifically in medicine?
Yeah, great question, Dan. The story always, at least in my opinion, is the impact we can make on individuals. I think that as we see this industry mature more and more, we're going to see more and more patient-specific instrumentation, medical devices, and just in general planning models to help us provide a higher level of care to the end customer, the patient. Where I think Stratasys and I see the value is that impact we make. Being in this industry for 8 years now and working with multiple patients and multiple clinicians through this process, seeing what the changes we can make in these patients' lives is amazing. I will forever cherish and remember those moments where I got to go into work with a clinician and actually sit down with a patient and talk to that patient about how does this model impact what you're going through, whether it's a prosthetic, an orthotic, whether it's just a simple pre-surgical planning model, or even if it's a cutting and drilling guide going into the operating room. Hearing from that clinician the impact it made, the easier and less risk it introduced into the operating room, but also hearing from the patient how much better they felt about it is just truly amazing. So I think that's what at the end of the day, the value we see in medical is the impact we can make and the way we can really change the clinical industry overall. So Dan, going back a little bit, I know that you started the industry with this one project you just spoke about, but when I was back visiting you guys in Belfast a few weeks ago, I heard it was something to do with a pair of trousers. Can you expand on that at all?
Yes, Evan was. So look, really, the inception of the company was figuring out taking these 2D images, forming them into 3D files and 3D printing them had huge impacts on the way that surgeons were going about diagnosing and treating their patients. But really, how the company started was a services-based company. So we made it really, really easy for surgeons to gain access to these 3D printed medical models by uploading it to our cloud-based system. So we allowed surgeons from all over the world to upload their DICOM medical images to that cloud platform. We would then segment those images and form them into 3D files, 3D print them and send them out to surgeons. But really what the kind of inception of the company that we know today as really an AI-driven image segmentation company that is making patient-specific 3D models routine in both clinical care and for medical device companies in their patient-specific programs. Really started with this story. So we'd worked in the company itself, Axial3D, our main research and development facility is based in Belfast, and we have the luxury of having one of Europe's largest orthopedic and trauma centres about a mile down the road from us. So we have pretty easy access to lots and lots of different clinicians. And what we've done in the first years of the company was to allow surgeons to get really easy access to these medical models for different cardiology cases, for neurovascular aneurysms, for pediatric orthopedics. And really, in that pediatric orthopedic space was really kind of where this story begins. We had a pretty innovative surgeon down in the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast, a guy called Jim Bollard. And he'd been making models for over 2 years with us, and every single model had a gigantic impact on how that patient was being treated and the types of devices that Mr. Bollard was bringing into the operating theatre with him, and all of that, this huge slew of benefits that was out there in research at the moment in terms of reduced time in operating theatre, reduced chances of infection, reduced time in theatre and the ICU. So what we really wanted to do was make it as easy as possible for them to get access to this. But what we didn't realize as well is just giving the surgeons access to this started to make them think in different ways. So just giving them access to a way to go from 2D images to 3D models really quickly and easily started to unlock a different way of thinking for this particular surgeon. And really it was, I was delivering a model to a surgeon in a coffee shop of all places when he was dropping his kids to school. And he was looking at this child's femur in a coffee shop who had a thing called osteogenesis imperfecta, some really brittle bones, and was measuring up different devices and kind of making plans in the coffee shop, which is, another one of the huge benefits of getting medical models is that it kind of unlocks different way of thinking and allows you to kind of step outside the clinical environment to do that thinking as well. A lot of our surgeons say that they always get the brightest ideas in the car on the way into the office when they've got their medical models sitting beside them in the car. But what this surgeon in particular had actually said to me is, "Can you print a pair of trousers?" And after quite a lot of head scratching and a few coffees later, what he really wanted to get done is this model you see in front of you here. So this is a patient, a young boy based in Belfast, an 8-year-old patient who has a condition called X-linked myotubular myopathy, with very, very brittle bones, and it meant that when the parents were bringing this child in under the wheelchair, it was actually causing those bones to fracture. So the traditional way of thinking, and the way of thinking without this kind of technology that we can bring to the table, was a plaster cast or traditional plaster cast that would go from the patient's belly button all the way down to their ankles, what most clinicians would call spiking. And this was fantastic therapeutic for the patient because it allowed him to get in and out of bed without fractures, allowed him to get in his wheelchair and have a normal standard of life. But really, the main problem with this was that if you've ever had a plaster cast on before, it's itchy, it's smelly, it can become sort of sore. And if you've had it on for 3 years, that all of those conditions are massively exacerbated. So this surgeon really was looking at different palliative care techniques or amputations when he had his traditional hat on. But really, because he had this different way of thinking of, I can take these 2D images that I would traditionally get, form them into 3D files and 3D print things, it started to make him think differently about how he could actually treat his patient. And really what we were able to do was take the cast of this patient's legs, CT scan that cast, form it into a 3D file, and then 3D print it on a large format 3D printer. And this was actually printed on one of the Fortis FDM machines, where the patient was actually able to be put into a walkable, breathable cast, and extended his life expectancy far beyond what the surgeon had initially believed. And that was just because of how that surgeon was thinking. So that made us pivot in the way that we were thinking about how we were delivering this, us as a company. And we couldn't do it manually. We needed to automate some of the steps in this process to make this patient-specific surgery really routine in medicine. And when you look at all the literature and the use cases, the vast majority are in and around creating anatomical models, 3D printed cutting guides, and 3D printed medical devices. And really, how the journey for all of those medical devices to start, they start with the 2D image, and forming those into the 3D files is, for most of the people on this webinar will understand that it's a labor-intensive process. It can be very repeatable, and it's really the bottleneck from getting from the traditional way of thinking and imaging and medicine to these patient-specific 3D files that we can that we see. And really, for those of you who don't know segmentation, the very crude way of describing it is it's really fancy coloring in. So you're taking those hundreds or thousands of 2D images that are based in these traditional imaging stacks, and you're coloring in that anatomy on each individual stack to form that patient-specific 3D file. So really, that's the big bottleneck in this industry becoming completely routine, and that's something that Axial3D has spent the last 6 or 7 years, revolutionizing and bringing, a solution to market that's cloud-based and automated, that can take these 2D images and form them into these patient-specific 3D files, so that surgeons, clinicians, and medical device companies can now start to think a little bit differently about how they can leverage data. And really, and it goes back to what you were saying, and it's all about the patient. It's all about delivering better standard of care that's patient-specific to that individual, because ultimately what we know is that it's going to vastly improve the standard of care that they can provide.
Yeah, that story there and everything you talked about, Dan, is what makes me so excited about 3D printing and the promise of AI as we look at segmentation. So
yeah.
Thank you for that just high-level overview of how the company started and going a little bit into segmentation and how it works. Now, when we look at Axial3D being kind of AI run for segmentation, can you describe a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, of course. So really how segmentation works, I've given the crude example. This is the slightly less crude example of how segmentation works. So what we have here are 3 CT scans of a scoliosis patient, a ventral septal defect patient, and a tibial plateau fracture. And how segmentation will work traditionally for most medical device companies or hospitals that are utilizing it today to make different patient-specific solutions is you will run through each individual 2D image, and you will draw the area of interest or the portion of anatomy that you would be most interested in. And
so is that kind of what we're seeing up here?
Exactly, yes. So
Okay.
you can see there, in the middle example of the cardiology case, the outside of the myocardium is outlined in orange, and the inside is outlined in green. And what that allows you to do is to start to extract that patient-specific 3D file out of that two-dimensional stack. And for hospitals, that means that you can start to make anatomical models, or for medical device companies that we work with, it means that if you're a medical device company that's building different scoliosis surgery instrumentations, it means that you can now start to build patient-specific vertebral bodies or vertebral cages on that two-dimensional data. And because we're doing that at scale and doing it in a very scalable way using machine learning, it allows those medical device companies to now not to think about, how might I use this technology for the kind of one-off extreme cases, but the more routine cases that you see on a day-to-day basis. Because eventually, where we know this industry goes to is the large-scale applications like the patient-specific hips and knees and things that you see being implanted into the bodies on a daily basis, making those all tailored to the patient.
And here we have some good examples of orthopedic and I'd say, cardiac case. Is there more than that, or is it limited to those two specific pathologies areas?
No, not at all, Evan. And I think that's one of the things that's unique about Axial3D. We have a wide variety of different machine learning models that we can run. So no matter where it is in the body or where the imaging modality will start from, whether that's CT, MRI, PET, SPECT, we've built an architecture or an infrastructure where all we need is data to actually, we can start curating large amounts of data to build these machine learning algorithms with. So effectively, we have the infrastructure to build algorithms for any different portion of anatomy in the human body, which means that it's not limited to orthopedics and cardiology. It can be in vascular, or we work with a lot of vascular companies where they're looking at aortic aneurysms or renal aneurysms, and they're looking at building different ways of how they might be able to treat that patient. And what we can do is give them that scalable example of how to segment their data.
That's amazing. Honestly, how do you know that your AI is, or your machine learning algorithm is working?
So yeah, really, really good question, Evan. So how we know it's working is through rigorous validations, and where that validation starts is really in the ground truth data that we have. And so at Axial3D, we've spent the last 6 or 7 years, as I was talking about, really developing like these algorithms, and at the heart of those algorithms is the data behind it. So we'll spend huge amounts of hours building ground truth databases from CT and MRI and different DICOM sources. And once those images are segmented, they'll go through a number of steps to make sure that the segmentation is correct. So they'll be validated by a number of biomedical engineers in-house, and then revalidated by trained clinicians, whether they be from radiology, orthopedics, cardiology backgrounds, really depending on what the input data is. And as we've developed those ground truth databases over the last 5 or 6 years, what we've been able to do is start to see a large uptake in the amount of confidence that we have in that data. The one thing I should say is that getting to a stage where this is completely automated is really where we're at now, where we can feed it, a CT orthopedic fracture, and for those kinds of cases where you might have an acute fracture or an acute case, we can now feasibly pull that three-dimensional data out without actually having humans in the loop, which is where this industry starts to get very exciting and starts to get very scalable. And we're going to start to do this completely automatically. And obviously, we'll make sure that we're putting the right human barriers in place when things need to be checked. But what ultimately Axial3D do as a company is to remove those unscalable bottlenecks for a lot of these patient-specific applications. This is a specific spinal model that when the company started, it would have taken probably one of our engineers 4 or 5 hours just to process each one of those individual images. And I think that right at the bottom of the screen, you can see that this imaging data set is made up of 1,520 individual images. So if you imagine you're an engineer or you're a radiologist or you're a surgeon, you're having to spend spend hours of your own time that you're not treating patients, individually segmenting each of these bones. And what you're seeing here is one of the results from our automated segmentation. So this is direct out of our cloud-based CNN, so convolutional neural network that will process those two-dimensional data sets and form it into these patient-specific 3D files. And if you're a medical device company that's starting to branch into patient-specific or custom devices, the starting block or the blueprint for building that device is what you see on the right. So unlocking this three-dimensional model at scale will mean that different medical device companies and even hospitals can now start to think a little bit differently about how they go about leveraging that data that they have to improve the standard of care that they can give to their patients.
For sure. And I think, kind of going back in our conversation a little bit, being able to take that 2D data, make it 3D so that clinician can better understand how to treat a patient, easily going to make the patient, have a better outcome. But at the end of the day, making that process automated even has more power, because it seems like there's a lot of time that's involved in segmentation until you bring machine learning in and, automation into that process.
Yeah, no, completely, Evan. I think that, if we relate it back, the big part of this is making most of these applications patient specific.
Yeah, that's the future I definitely want to see in the world.
Yeah.
I think that would be amazing if we can get to that point. I did have one other question for you, kind of rolling back a little bit to the automation, machine learning, and scalability of it. With your machine learning algorithms, about how long does it take to do an orthopedic model or a cardiac model, like just from uploading it and having the machine learning algorithm run on it?
That's a really, really great question, Evan. I suppose the key part of Axial3D that we don't talk about a huge amount is the fact that everything that we have is cloud-based. So if you're a surgeon or a medical device company that wants to leverage this technology, all you have to do is go on their website. And because all of our data and our convolutional neural networks are hosted on the cloud platform, it means that it's a matter of uploading that data. And because we can leverage really, really, high-powered, beefy computing, it means that, these segmentations can be run in minutes, Evan. So from getting the 2D images onto from registering and getting your 2D images onto the site takes 2 or 3 minutes. And then in the background, once that DICOM data is uploaded, that algorithm is then run in a number of minutes as well. And what Axial3D do as a company is we have a service bureau that, no matter what data is coming through, we will then check that data to ensure that, one, the algorithm is done its job, and two, that it's quality assured to an ISO 134 standard, so that when you're getting back that three-dimensional model, it's of a specific medical standard.
That's truly amazing. That's an incredibly quick process. I know I've banged my head against a couple of segmentation projects in the past, so I would have loved this, a few years back when I was doing more segmentation myself.
Yeah, and I think the key thing with Axial3D is we take these two-dimensional data sets and we form them into these 3D digital files. A lot of what we do is, we'll bring it into different workflows for creating patient-specific implants with medical device companies or guides, or even bringing it into things like augmented reality or virtual reality. But, a lot of what we do is bringing them into the physical world, so 3D printing them. And I think that, one of the key things from Axial3D's perspective is, really wanting to make sure that, there's a wide variety of different technologies or materials that can be pointed at these different applications. And I think that, one of the things that we've seen from Stratasys over the last number of years is the multiple acquisitions and the different investments in, materials development to really make sure that you're leveraging all different technologies and materials to kind of point at different areas. And I think that's a really, really important thing. I suppose, from your perspective, like, what do you see as being the most important thing in a production system for a medical device company? from a 3D printing point of view?
Yeah, no, great question, Dan. Thank you. So the way I like to talk about Stratasys and 3D printing, Dan, is primarily looking at the breadth of technologies we have, right? I feel truly lucky to be working for Stratasys at this time with not only the original 3D printers that we had when I started, which was, of course, fused deposition modeling at Stratasys, but then also it was pretty recently after the merger that I joined. So we also had objet polyjet technology, but now we're bringing in vat photopolymerization technologies with RPS and stereolithography, Origin with our DLP technology, and then also ZAR with the SAF technology, selective absorption fusion. And I've had truly a lucky opportunity to work with all of these technologies so far over the past year, and I'm absolutely amazed, I think, in the direction we can bring industry. I use the Swiss Army knife as an example, right? We can have just polyjet in a lab, and there's no issue with that. It certainly functions for everything. It's, truly is, in a way, a Swiss Army knife, but that doesn't mean it's perfect at everything, right? So that's where we can start to bring in and say, well, hey, if you want to create anatomical models that are visual in nature, so you can plan, the resection of a tumor, for example, polyjet's a great technology for that. But if you want to start creating a cutting guide to cut into a bone or drill into a bone, whatever it may be, right, then maybe we need to look at an Origin technology with our P3. If we're looking at scaling this and we want to create, thousands of patient-specific models, then maybe we need to look a little bit more in the direction of stereolithography with the RPS solution, or selective absorption fusion, building cutting guides out of nylon 11 or nylon 12, where we can print, thousands of these cutting guides. Most geometries are going to work in this case a day. 1,000 a day is just an insane number. So I again go back to the Swiss Army knife. Is what are you trying to do? That's always the first question I ask. Is if we're looking to just create anatomical models that have been segmented, that's where we go with polyjet, because it creates these beautiful, almost pieces of art, right? That really help not only that patient understand the surgery they're going through, but that clinician to better understand where there could be potential risks as they go in. If we're looking at those cutting, those drilling guides, how do we make sure that they go through the autoclave? How do we make sure they make it into that operating room without any changes to the geometry? How do we make sure when they're on that patient? And we have to make sure we're choosing the right materials in those cases. So again, truly, I feel lucky to be working for Stratasys at this time because we have so many different opportunities available to, I think, really make an impact again on that end customer, that patient, and make their lives better in a truly unique way.
Yeah, and Evan, just kind of touching on that, I suppose in medicine, a lot of the personalized applications that different medical device companies are going to be looking at, they're really, really highly scaled. So whether you're looking at shoulder implants, knee implants, stents, aortic aneurysms, these aren't one-offs. It's starting to get into the world of mass customization. So, what's Stratasys been looking at over the last few years in terms of the sort of industrial nature or the repeatability of their printing?
Yeah, so we've spent a lot of time, personally myself, I have spent a lot of time as well, looking into how do we make our systems and our processes more repeatable? What do we need to introduce to not only ourselves, but the industry as a whole from an additive manufacturing standpoint to make it easier and more accessible to integrate these technologies. So that's something where we started a project on maybe 3 years ago where we looked at from a process V&V, verification and validation standpoint, how do we validate, or sorry, I should say here, how do we verify and validate that our machines are set up properly on site with a device manufacturer? How do we make sure that as they want to either manufacture a one-size-fits-all, that generic device, or maybe even a patient-specific device, that they're going to be following not only our process that's outlined in our user guide, but they're going to be following it in the correct way that's going to have a perceivable impact on the manufacturing process. Kind of defining, if there are any manufacturing or industrial engineers out there, where kind of those red lines and those yellow lines are in our process. Yellow line being the warning, and the red line being, we're outside of conformance. So we've generated a lot of documentation around that specific to the medical industry on the medical team at Stratasys, and we're continuing to look for partners that help us scale that to more and more, so that we can enable you to really successfully manufacture devices with additive. So the one thing I think the most frequent question I get asked is can I manufacture, you mentioned stents, can I manufacture stents out of nitinol? All the time I get asked that question. And, I think it's a good goal for the industry, the entire additive industry as a whole to strive towards, specifically nitinol printing first, and then, we'll see how we can calibrate that a little bit more past just printing it. But as we get down to those thinner walls, things can be a little bit challenging. And especially when it comes to metal, Stratasys, we're a polymer company. Our goal is to be that polymer company you go to when you're looking to manufacture something with any polymer that's on the market today. So as we look into scaling, I think solutions, it's really good to work with I'd say groups that truly understand how to properly segment models for these different technologies, right? The way I segment a model for an origin printer is oftentimes going to be different compared to a polyjet printer, because with polyjet I have multiple colors. Sign can sometimes be a imposing question. It's really simple, especially working through a segmentation group like Axial3D. So I think at the end of the day, Axial3D and Stratasys are a match made in heaven. Is what I like to refer to it as, just because what you guys have done with your machine learning algorithms, Dan, has truly made it a lot easier for anyone to get involved with just creating anatomical models. And now we can look towards the future and the direction we're going with not only anatomical models, but what can we do to extend that? And you've talked a little bit about this already, Dan, but what else can we do with a machine learning algorithm?
So in terms of what else we can do, Evan, I suppose bringing it back to what I was saying earlier on, taking the imaging stack that is sort of locked in the hospital and kind of locked in the two-dimensional world, and applying machine learning to turn that into a patient-specific 3D model builds a huge amount of different applications in terms of how you can apply that technology. And really what that it unlocks is the scalability aspect. So if you're starting with a patient-specific 3D file, you can then look into getting into huge different areas of medicine. And the way we like to break it down is really in three different categories in terms of how do we make different patient-specific planning models. So the traditional 3D models that you'll see for planning things like radiotomies, and different patient-specific diagnostic applications. So diagnosis in the world of medicine is, how do I take in a 3D model? And really diagnosis is just about measurements. So measuring the length of something, measuring the volume of a tumor, let's say, or the level of stenosis in a particular vessel. And what we can do as a company is start to leverage those patient-specific 3D files and start to extract that diagnostic information out of it. So we're working on a number of different exciting applications where we're taking things like CT scans and vascular applications, pulling those into 3D files and starting to pull out new clinical data where you can look at, the level of stenosis on a coronary vessel, for example, or, where a clot in the brain is going to be around the circle of Willis for stroke patients. And that's now starting to kind of bleed into, pardon that, into other areas of medicine and really looking at patient-specific medical devices or treatments. And I think that's really the most exciting growth area that we see for different medical device companies. And what we've seen in the market is most of the medical device companies on the planet are really starting to see the huge benefits that patient-specific implants or devices can bring to their patients. What we can do as a company is start to work with these different medical device companies to implement device-specific algorithms, whether that be, say, you're a knee replacement company, we can build a specific machine learning algorithm around the knee based on a very certain scanning type to build a patient-specific workflow where images will come in, a 3D model will be created, and we can also do, because of the skill sets that we have in-house at Axial3D, is start to build different generative design technologies around that to actually build things like implants or assist in design for additive manufacturing or look at designing the automation of, let's say, 3D printed cutting guides for those specific applications. So it's really looking at how we leverage the existing core technology that we have as a company and taking these 2D images and form them into patient-specific 3D files, and then pointing that at different specific areas in medicine where medical device companies can really scale their different applications and bring their existing off-the-shelf generic, let's call them, applications and bring them closer towards, being more important or, improving the care for their patients by making them individualized to those patients.
No, that's truly amazing, and I think it just brings it back to, I think, ideally, again, crossing my fingers here, 30 to 40 years when I need a knee implant, hopefully that knee implant is patient specific and designed precisely to my anatomy. If we look at this a little bit from a higher level, how many knee implants would you say are done a year?
Good question. I'm not 100% sure on the global number, but let's take the likes of the UK is about 80,000, the US is about, I think, 820,000. So if you're thinking that each one of those starts with a two-dimensional imaging data set, and that's called traditionally, you might need to segment each of those individual data sets. It's thousands of years of manual processing time to start to make the first leap into making those devices patient specific. But luckily with our technology, what medical device companies can start to do is, shave years off their processing time to start to bring these individualized patient-specific implants to their portfolios.
That's awesome. And if I were to ask, what's the maximum number of segmentations you can do in an hour? Could you give me a number?
As a human, one by one, as a cloud-based machine learning algorithm, because of the infrastructure that one of our partners, AWS, has put in place, it's really as many as we want. The really good thing about having our technology based in the cloud is that regardless of how many data sets are being pushed through at one time, they can all be pushed through in parallel, as opposed to being kind of serialized or put through in a specific chain. And really, that's the beauty of the system is, if you're a medical device company and you're processing hundreds of cases a day, it's not hundreds of individuals a day processing that data. It's running it through one of those machine learning stacks, and you can push through as many as you want in a day because of the cloud computing that we can get access to for our technology. We're not replacing biomedical engineers or radiologists or surgeons. What we're doing is alleviating all of the really, really long labor-intensive processes to get to the process where you can really impact on a patient's life by leveraging patient-specific 3D files. So removing those bottlenecks and kind of getting to more care, and same way ChatGPT might be able to alleviate bottlenecks in prescription writing so that surgeons or pharmacists or clinicians can do more important roles or more important jobs.
Awesome. Thanks for the insight, Dan. I appreciate it. Before we move to questions and answers, any other questions you had for me?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the other thing to ask is, are you excited for Vegas?
Yeah, I'm incredibly excited for the future of medicine and where we could take it as we move into, I'd say, more and more automation, not only from the software side, but the technology, the hardware side as well.
Yeah.
So with that, we'll open it up for any questions that have come through.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our engaging conversation today. Please add any questions you might still have in the Q&A at this time so we can have Evan and Dan join us to answer those. First one looks like From Julia, do you ever do segmentation for lymphatic network of the nervous system that can be layered over the models?
Evan, maybe this is one I can take. So Justin, yes, we have done areas like that similar in the past where we've segmented out things like nerves or nervous systems or very fine details from two-dimensional imaging stacks. The one thing that we would always recommend is that we get a specific image quality when we're segmenting something so small. So we have a team of medical engineers here that would be more than happy to guide you in terms of what are the best imaging modalities to segment those lymphatic systems or nerves from those 2D scans to create a really nice three-dimensional model. And I suppose the nice thing now about partnering with Stratasys is for those really complex models where you might be looking at, say, large portions of anatomy where you've got a lot of different overlaying pieces of nervous systems or structures. It's a prime candidate for their digital anatomy printer or their polyjet technology, where you can visualize and see lots of different structures in one scene or one model and differentiate them.
Excellent. So I have another question from Deepak. Can your infrastructure handle scans of eyes, retina specifically? Dan, I think that one's for you.
Yeah, I can take that one too. Yes. So look, our service can certainly do that. It's actually something we do in a lot of cases where it might be an orbital floor or a nasal tumor, where our surgeons, clinicians that we work with are looking at seeing the optic nerve, the retina, and the actual eye itself in context with that three-dimensional structure, so something like a tumor. So it is something that we can do, and we'd be more than happy to take one of those cases as a potential example.
Fantastic. Evan, is that something that Stratasys 3D printers could be helpful with, you think?
Absolutely. There's no problem with us printing that on any number of our technologies. In my opinion, that's a really good fit for the J5 MediJet, especially if we're looking to create a visual representation of what that eye may actually look like.
Excellent. Great to know. Another question came through. Does Axial3D provide segmentation software, or is it something different? I think that's for Dan.
Yeah. So Justin, we get asked this question all the time. So Axial3D don't actually provide a segmentation software. So what we provide is a service. So really what we as a company are doing is really removing all of the bottlenecks and getting to the patient-specific 3D file. And what we mapped out 6 or 7 years ago after the story I was telling there about Nathan's pair of trousers is, the biggest bottleneck in any of these two-dimensional scans getting to a patient-specific 3D file is the segmentation. And really what we've done is create a cloud-based machine learning system that can ingest two-dimensional DICOM data and automatically process that into patient-specific 3D files that can go on to different areas of medicine, whether that be an anatomical model or something in diagnostics or treatment. But really, as a company, we don't actually sell a software. So we remove that burden from the medical device company or the clinician, and really what we provide is a really easy to use service so that they can get started on this journey really quickly and easily.
That's really nice. Very accessible for our audience today. Pam asks, what do you tell clinicians as the best steps for starting or convincing management of the value of your service? I think this is probably for both of you guys. If you want to start with it, Dan, that'd be great.
Yeah, so look, we get asked this on multiple occasions with different hospitals that we work with, and really what's worked really well in the past with us is helping those hospitals and different departments actually start to build a corpus of data around what the utility of the 3D printed models will be. And a lot of the times there'll be specific data that will cross different specialties, and some that'll be more specific to orthopedics, cardiology, or neurology. And we've done a number of these in the past, and we're more than happy to support different departments kind of start to build that different evidence. But really what it's around is, what's the improvement of care that these models can provide to different patients, and that improvement of care can then lead on to different reduction in cost for the healthcare provider. And a lot of that is built around reduction in theatre time, improved blood loss for long, lengthy procedures, and then also in the amount of time that the patient spends in the likes of ICU and the sterilization of different devices that will go in with them. So it's about developing a large corpus of data to help prove out the utility and the efficiency of these types of models that are produced. I don't know, Evan, if you've anything to add.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer, Dan. And I really have a two-part answer to this. Number one is, there's a lot of existing studies out there today that provide hard clinical evidence and data surrounding the value of 3D printing and segmenting models. I know there's quite a few studies in the CMF space that I would refer to, which we can definitely share those if you reach out to us. Happy to provide them. But number two is, I think some of the experiences I have in working with clinicians is I hear a lot of clinicians will actually go on grand rounds and start to take specific cases and say, hey, let's try 3D printing this. Let's try segmenting this. Let's use this as an example case, post it being completed as a potential way to garner more interest in 3D printing and segmentation for specific surgeries.
Excellent. And what about in the med device space specifically, kind of today? Is there anything that you'd recommend, trying to add that value add for the people that might be from that field here today?
Yeah, Justin, great question. So really the value add, especially for medical device companies that we work with, is ultimately on the scalability side. So when we speak to a lot of medical device companies, it's really, how can we improve the standard of care that we can give to our patients with our specific medical devices? And where a lot of these companies are being guided towards is bringing tailored or patient-specific medicine to them. So really, what we can provide is that scalable element of taking the CTs or the MRIs that these medical device companies will traditionally get in and use to evaluate, to put in an off-the-shelf device, and start to tailor and create these patient-specific 3D models that they can start to go on this journey of, making these patient-specific three-dimensional devices.
Excellent. Great. Okay, moving on to our next question from Anders. What is your perspective or interpretation on Pro-C within the hospital going on art when producing patient-matched medical devices? Hopefully you know what that means better than I do, Dan. So if you can take that one.
Yeah, so I think the question's in around what my perception is of hospitals actually starting to print at the point of care and actually printing medical devices and patient-matched devices at the point of care. And I think, Evan, you can probably expand on the answer that I'm going to be giving. But, I think what we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years, particularly at big shows like AAOS and RSNA in America, is that more and more hospitals and healthcare systems are starting to adopt 3D printing as an actual department at the point of care. And really that comes from the value that a lot of long-standing institutions are starting to really see from it, like the Mayo Clinic or Cleveland Clinic, or a number of different widely distributed hospitals. But, I think that over time, more and more of those hospitals will start to adopt the technology in-house just because of the benefits. But equally, for this type of technology, it needs to be accessible to everyone. So what Axial3D and Stratasys are ultimately doing is really building a way for different hospitals and medical device companies to start early on without any or very little upfront investment to really start on that journey. And so logging onto our system and starting an order is a simple 2 or 3 minute process. And then from that, you can then 3D print it in one of our service bureaus from anywhere in Europe or the USA on a Stratasys machine to get it to the point of care. So they can start really, really small and start to build up to more of that point of care journey where they're bringing that technology in-house. So I think the short answer to that is really, yes, I see it happening at the point point of care, and I think it's going to grow slowly over the next 5 to 10 years.
And adding on to that, Dan, looking a little bit from the FDA's point of view, the white papers now, the multiple white papers and guidance documents that they've released are incredibly, I think, an incredibly interesting perspective on the direction they think the industry is going. And it aligns pretty much with what you said there, Dan. I think that we're actually going to start seeing some 3D printing manufacturers potentially partner with medical device manufacturers to bring a device to the market. But that market or that device will be produced on a 3D printer that's located at the point of care. Now, who's responsible for that? Where does the risk fall? Where's the liability? I think is still an open question, and that the FDA is definitely working on. I think you see that reflected in some of those publications I mentioned.
Yeah,
but it'll definitely be an interesting next couple of years, I think, in the medical device market.
Right. Another great question that's come through. Can you please explain in detail about soft tissue and vascular segmentation, and also suggest some software for the segmentation? What kind of input data are required for printing a whole cadaver? Whoa, lots of stuff there. Dan, you want to start out?
Yeah, no, I'll try to break that question down as well as I can, Justin.
Okay.
So in terms of the detail on segmenting soft tissue and in particular vascular tissue, where the input data that would come from that, for a lot of soft tissue applications, generally speaking, the kind of catch-all answer to that is using MRI. So MRI will be a lot better at segregating or visualizing different soft tissues within the body, whether that be muscle or brain tissue. And in particular, when you're looking at vascular applications, it's actually the flip of that, where CT is very good, especially a CT angiogram specifically, where contrast dye will be pumped through the vasculature, and it will allow a very comprehensive segmentation of that whole vascular system to be done. And in terms of the software for segmenting that, obviously that's something that Axial3D can provide through its Axial3D Insight platform. So, like a vascular application, what we would suggest is uploading something like a CT or a CT angiogram to the platform, going through our simple order process and getting an example model today.
Yeah,
excellent.
And just from the 3D printing aspect, we get asked this question a lot. Can we 3D print a whole cadaver? And I think the simple answer is yes. But the little bit of a longer answer on that is we can pretty much print any part of the human body. Now, the accuracy levels are going to vary throughout the human body today. Again, there's a lot of, I keep referring to these white papers. There are a lot of white papers and studies out there that have been done on 3D printed, using different technologies, 3D printed cadaver replacements, which I think are really interesting to see, specifically with our digital anatomy printer at Stratasys. We've gotten, I would say about 75% of the way there in replicating the human body. And I'm not necessarily saying 75% of the human body is replicable. Today, we print and play, right? It's more of still a little bit of a research tool when we look at the whole human body. We've really dialed it in when it comes to creating some of our soft and fatty tissues, to creating muscle tissues. But once we kind of get down to how do I create a stomach and all the layers between the stomach and the skin, that's where it starts to get a little bit more complex of how does everything react together.
Understood. Okay. It looks like there's a couple of questions about the studies and white papers and things like that. Would that just be something they can reach out to you for, Evan, you think, to be able to share some of that? Some folks are looking for justification. Yeah.
Absolutely. We can support you on that. I think in a couple of slides you have our contact information. There's also a QR code you can scan to access the Axial3D website. So once we get to those, certainly reach out to us, scan that QR code. We're happy to help.
Excellent. The webinar will be made available. Absolutely. Thank you for asking that. And I think this is, please feel free to add a few more questions. We've got a few more minutes if anyone has anything else they'd like to add. What would you say are the best next steps for those who are ready to get started with this process? Maybe starting at the beginning, and then maybe those who are looking to scale. It's probably a question for both of you.
Start?
Yeah. Yeah, no, of course, Evan. So Justin, yeah, like the really simple way to get started is really to register on our Insight platform. So as I mentioned during the talk, it's as simple as going on your website. Everything that we have is cloud-based, so you just go on to orders.axial3d.com, and we'll ask for a few bits of information from you, like your first and second name, your email address, so you can actually register an account. And what that will do is take you through a process that will allow you to start to order from our standard catalog of different models, and then allow you to upload your standard DICOM images that will then be run through our machine learning algorithms and processed on our side as that service. And in terms of the scaling side, when we work with a lot of medical device companies, what we do, because lots of medical device companies will have highly scaled applications that are quite niche specifically for them, is really to get in touch. And I think, as Evan said, Justin, you've got our contact details on the last slide of this presentation. We'd love to have a conversation with you about what your next scaling application is going to be in patient specific, and how the tools that we've developed over the last number of years can help different medical device companies on that journey to bringing a lot of these off-the-shelf implants or devices into more of the patient specific realm.
And on the hardware and material side, whether you're looking to bring this in-house yourself with the slew of technologies I mentioned earlier, we're here to help you develop with those technologies as well. And if you're looking to utilize more of a service, we do have fulfillment partners that are ISO 13485, have ISO 13485 certified facilities that are ready to produce parts for your applications as you scale up.
That is great to know, Evan and Dan. Thank you so much for that. If there are no other final questions sneaking in here under the deadline, we're going to go ahead and proceed and pass out some content information and give you some opportunities to meet with us. We are going to be attending upcoming shows. You can see here, if any of you would like to meet up in person, please reach out to Evan and Dan, and we can get those things set up. Those are our booth numbers there for the next few weeks. Additionally, this is the QR code. This is a great starting point here to be paying attention to. So if you'd like to set up your account with Axial3D and start working through this workflow, this is the place to start. So I'll leave that up there for a few minutes here, a few seconds, where you can get that scanned. You can also check out the website orders.axial3d.com if that's easier for you. And here's the contact information for Dan and Evan. If you'd like to continue the conversation directly with them, please feel free to reach out. And you can always connect with us online and on social. Axial3D and Stratasys both are on all social channels that are available out there. I'll leave that up there for a second so you can get that contact information. Do not hesitate to reach out, please. And most of all, we want to say thank you. Oh, looks like we have one more thank you for the product and the event. Thank you so much to you as well, Charles. Thank you to all of you who took some time out today to spend some time with Axial3D and Stratasys Healthcare. We hope the information provided was informative and interesting, and we hope it helps you start to justify some of those discussions you may have with on your teams and with your leadership about starting this process. We feel we bring a really compelling solution here together with Axial3D and Stratasys. Please feel free to follow us on social, as I mentioned, engage with Evan and Dan directly, and we hope to see you in person soon. Please register for more webinars with Stratasys, and we look forward to talking with you soon. Thank you so much for your time today. Have a great one.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.